Cancellation. Canceling before execution. If you need to cancel a thunk before the payload creator is called, you may provide a condition callback as an option after the payload creator. The callback will receive the thunk argument and an object with getState and extra, that is inside of the curly braces, as parameters, and use those to decide whether to continue or not. If the execution should be cancelled, the condition callback should return a literal false value or a promise that should resolve to false. If a promise is returned, the thunk waits for it to get fulfilled before dispatching the pending action. Otherwise, it proceeds with dispatching synchronously. This is an example that we have here. We have this variable name fetch user by ID, and we are setting it to the create a sync thunk. Inside of the parentheses, we have these arguments. We have this string with users slash fetch by ID status. Then the second argument is going to be this asynchronous function. And as a parameters, we have the user ID set to number, and then the thunk API. Inside of the curly braces of the asynchronous function, we're going to have this variable name response, and since this is asynchronous, we're going to await, and we are going to await for user API that fetch by ID, and we are going to fetch the user ID. And now we're going to return the response.data, and data is an object. So that is that. And what else do we have here? So inside of the parentheses, we have this argument. The asynchronous function is going to be the second argument, and as a third argument, we are going to have this object with, we have here condition that is set to this arrow function, and we have as parameters the user ID, and inside curly braces we have the getState and extra. To the right, to the arrow inside of the curly braces, we're gonna destructure the users, and we are destructuring from the getState function. Now we have this variable here, the fetch status, and we are setting it to the users that requests, and inside of the brackets we pass in the user ID. And now we have the condition if statement. So if the fetch status is equal to the fulfilled or the fetch status is equal to loading, then we're gonna return false. Already fetched or in progress, don't need to refetch. Now here, if condition returns false, the default behavior is that no actions will be dispatched at all. If you still want a rejected action to be dispatched when the thunk was cancelled, passing inside curly braces we have the condition, the dispatch condition rejection, and is set to true. Canceling while running. If you want to cancel your running thunk before it has finished, you can use the abort method of the promise returned by the dispatch. Inside of the parentheses we have the fetch user by ID, and we have the user ID. A real life example of that would look like this. So here they're using TS, that is TypeScript, so we have the store.ts, no emit, and basically we are importing configure store, and we are importing it from @redux.js/toolkit. We also importing import type inside of the curly braces reducer, and we are bringing it from the @reduce.js/toolkit. Also we are importing use dispatch, and we are importing it from React Redux. So here we're gonna declare a const reducer colon, then we have reducer inside of the angle brackets. We're gonna have an empty set of curly braces. We're gonna have this variable name store, and we're gonna set it to the configure store. So inside of the parentheses we're gonna have this object reducer. Then we're gonna export const use app dispatch, and we're gonna set it to this arrow function. No arguments here, but we're gonna have the use dispatch, and it's gonna be type of store.dispatch. So again, we have another file. This is an example. This would be TypeScript, and this is .ts. So we're gonna import create a think tank from at redux.js/toolkit. We're gonna export cans fetch user by ID, and we're gonna set it to create a think tank, and we're gonna pass in this parameters here. We're gonna pass in the string fetch user by ID, and also this error function that is gonna take as an argument user ID set to a string, and here we're gonna have the curly braces set to an empty set of curly braces. So here we have the file mycomponent.ts. So we are importing fetch user by ID from this folder. In this case would be, or the file that /slice. We are also importing the use app dispatch from that /store, and we are importing React from React itself. So here we have this function named myComponent, and we're gonna have props calling, and then we're gonna have this object user ID set to string. Inside of the curly braces, we're gonna have this variable dispatch set to use app dispatch, and then we're gonna use React. So we're gonna use React.useEffect, and inside of the parentheses, we're gonna dispatching the thing returns a promise. So we have this variable promise and it's set to dispatch. Inside of the parentheses, we're gonna fetch user by ID, and inside of the parentheses of the fetch user by ID, we're gonna pass in the props that user ID. Then we're gonna return an error function, no arguments, and inside of the curly braces, we're gonna have the promise that abort. So it's gonna be the promise that abort function, and create a think tank attaches an abort method to the promise. So we're using this method here. Okay, so outside of that, we're gonna have the inside of brackets, we're gonna have the props that user ID, and then we're gonna close our parentheses. And finally, so this parenthesis goes from the React.useEffect, so it goes here, and then we're gonna close our curly braces right here of the function myComponent. After a thing has been cancelled this way, it will dispatch and return a thing name /rejected action with an abort error on the error property. The thing will not dispatch any further actions. Additionally, your payload center or your payload creator can use the abort signal. It is passed via the thing API that signal to actually cancel a costly asynchronous action. So here we have the fetch API of modern browsers already comes with support of an abort signal, and here they give us this example. So we are importing create a think tank from at redux.js/toolkit. We have this variable name fetch user by ID, and we are setting it to create a think tank. And inside of the parentheses, we're gonna have these parameters, this string users /fetch by ID. The second parameter is going to be this asynchronous function, so we're going to take user ID set to a string as the first parameter or argument, and the second argument is going to be the thing API. Inside of the curly braces, we're going to have this variable name response, and since this is asynchronous, we're going to await for fetch. And inside of the parentheses, we're going to use backticks, and we're going to use this URL https://request response that /API/user/ and then the $, and we open curly braces, and we're gonna have in the user ID. So we close the backticks, we put a comma, and we're gonna open curly braces, and we're gonna have the signal calling, and it's gonna be set to the thing API that signal. So then we close the curly braces here, we close the parentheses of the response variable, and finally we're gonna return await response.json. So checking cancellation status, reading the signal value. You can use the signal that aborted property to regularly check if the thing has been aborted, and in that case stop costly long running work. So here again we are importing create a think tank, and we are importing it from at redux.js/toolkit. We have this variable name read stream, and we are setting it to the create a think tank. So pretty much it's very similar. We have this parameters, this string that is read the stream. We have the asynchronous function that is taking the string set to the readable stream, and then we have the subject that is signal. And inside of the curly braces, we are going to have this variable reader that is going to be set to a string that get reader function. So we're using a const declaration here. So this is a constant, but now we're going to use the let declaration. So this variable name, or this variable name down, we're using the let declaration is set to false. And now the let declaration, this variable name result, is set to an empty set of single quotes. So now we're going to use the while loop. So while not down, so while not false, we're going to do something. So we're going to use the if statement. If signal that aborted, then we're going to throw a new error. Stop the work, this has been aborted. So this string we're going to pass in. Now we're going to use the read. So okay, so we're going to create this variable read, and we're going to await reader. So we're going to await reader that read. So read is a function here, and then we're going to use the result plus equal sign read that value. So it's going to increment the result plus the read that value to the left, and then we're going to have the done. This variable done that is set to false is going to be set to read that done. We close the curly braces, and we're going to return the result. Listening for abort events. You can also call signal.event listener, and we have here this string abort and then the callback to have logic inside the thunk be notified when promised that abort was called. This can, for example, be used in conjunction with Axios cancel token. So we have the import, and we're importing create a sync thunk from the @redux.js/toolkit, and also we are importing Axios. And first of all, in order to import it, we will need to install it. So in the next video, we're gonna start working in Visual Studio Code, but in order to import it, you have to install first Node.js and then use the npm package manager. So you will do npm install Axios in order to use Axios in order to import it. So here we have import actions from Axios itself, and now we're gonna have this variable, the fetch user by ID, and we're gonna set it to the create a sync thunk. So again, we have this string users / fetch by ID. We have the asynchronous function that is going to take the user ID set to a string, this object signal, and in the curly braces we're going to have this variable source set to Axios that cancel token that source. Now we're going to have the signal that event listener, and inside of the parentheses we're going to have this string abort, comma, and the second argument is going to be a error function, and inside of the parentheses, inside of the curly braces, we're going to have the source that cancel. So we can close the curly braces here. We can close the parentheses, and now we're going to use this variable name response, and we are going to await, Axios that get. So we're going to be using here the get method. So we're going to get information, and we're going to get it from this URL. So we're going to use backticks https://request response.n/API/users/ and then the $, and inside of the $, we're going to open curly braces, and we're going to have the user ID, and then we're going to close backticks, comma, and then we're going to open the curly braces, and we are going to have the cancel token, and we're going to open colon, and we're going to set it to the source that token. So that is that. We close the curly braces, and we close the parentheses, and we are going to return the response.data. Now we see checking if a promise rejection was from an error or cancellation. To investigate behavior around thunk cancellation, you can inspect various properties on the meta object of the dispatch action. If a thing was cancelled, the result of the promise will be a rejected action, regardless of whether the action was actually dispatched to the store. If it was cancelled before execution, metadata condition will be true. If it was aborted while running, metadata aborted will be true. If neither of those is true, the thing was not cancelled. It was simply rejected by either by a promise rejection or reject with value. If the thing was not rejected, both metadata aborted and metadata condition will be undefined. So if you wanted to test that a thing was cancelled before executing, you can do the following. So they give us this example. We are importing create async thing and also s rejected from @redux.js/toolkit, and we're using this test. Inside of the parentheses we have this string. This thing should always be a skip, so we have this string here. As a second parameter we have an asynchronous function, and inside of the curly braces we're gonna have this thing variable, and we're gonna set it to the create async thing. We're gonna pass in the string users /fetch by id, and the second parameter we're gonna have another asynchronous function, but this time it's gonna throw a new error, and the string is gonna be this promise should never be entered. Okay, outside of that we're gonna have this object with a condition set to this error function, and as a parameters we have nothing, but it's set to false. And then we're gonna have this variable named result, and we're gonna await the function thank, and then we're gonna dispatch. We're gonna have this parameters dispatch get state and null. Finally we're gonna have the expect, and we're gonna have result that metadata condition, and then we're gonna chain it to be true, and then we're gonna pass in the boolean true. Expect, and then we're gonna have result that metadata aborted, and then we're gonna chain it to be, and then the boolean false. And here you can check out some examples here. So they are pretty similar. You can just follow along. You have using reject with value to access a custom rejected payload and a component. So this is a contrived example assuming our user API only ever throws validation specific errors. So you can check out this. What else we have here?